Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. 26 years ago, we celebrated our Independence Day. This week, we just kind of tolerate it. This is Independence Day Resurgence. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Independence Day Resurgence, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, sadly, how are you doing this week, Ian?
Let's just say all my worst fears for the future made a resurgence this week. Sitting here watching a movie where a 3,000-mile wide spaceship is trying to destroy the Earth. And I'm like, well, at least it's not as bad as real life. Nice to escape to fun stuff in the movies sometimes.
Yeah, the world was in peril there, but it was the kind of peril you could just shoot a laser gun at a big monster. And if that worked out, you'd be okay. And the world is actually in peril and not the kind you can shoot away with a big laser gun.
No.
At least not without getting in a lot of trouble. So
let's everyone keep their lasers holstered, please. We don't need lasers on top of everything else.
I think you summed up my feelings as well. I'm also very tired today, so that's not helping my mood overall. Not sleeping very well. I can't imagine why. Something going on in the world?
Well, you just came out of a 20-year coma. It takes a little while to get your energy up.
Surprisingly, it doesn't. Actually, my voice and my feet, all my limbs and everything works immediately. There was no kind of recovery period necessary.
Well, it helps that you're an android, I think.
You're mixing up your Brent Spiner roles here.
I crossed some of my space references.
Yeah, before we dive into this fucking wet fart of a movie, did you have anything you watched this week that you thought would actually be fun to talk about?
I did. I watched something super fun. I went back and watched an oldie by the name of Rushmore. Came out way back in 1999, and it's better than I remembered. I saw it way back in the day. Now we throw Wes Anderson into this bucket where we sneer at him and we mock.
He threw himself in this bucket, to be fair.
He might have thrown himself in, but we scoff at his indulgences. And this movie's kind of raw, and it's just really funny. And the scene work is so good. And I got to give credit to Owen Wilson, who co-wrote the script with him. You go into every scene with exactly what you want in the sense of, this character's about to meet this character. What's going to happen? How's it going to resolve it? And it always manages to surprise you. Characters do something different and go bigger or go weirder or different than you think, and it's delightful. And usually it's Max that does something unexpected, but they let all the characters have some whimsical approaches to life, and it's just a good movie. It's a nice, fun little flick.
Those early Wes Anderson movies really worked on me. Bottle Rocket, I was a big fan of. I liked Rushmore, Tenenbaums, like pretty much everything up until the Darjeeling Limited. I was fully on board with, and now he's a little more hit or miss for me. Like I liked Moonrise Kingdom, I liked Fantastic Mr. Fox, but like Isle of Dogs, I could take it or leave it. The French Dispatch, I could take it or leave it. But yeah, he's an easy figure to poke fun at because he has his idiosyncrasies and he leans so hard into being twee.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the show notes, but it reminded me of one of my favorite tweets from our buddy Nate, Soul Nate. It's called Wes Anderson Films Ranked, and then he just makes up these kind of very flowery titles like A Prognostication Most Dire, The Bordeaux Crisis, Young Periwinkle, and The Gentleman's Chartreuse. So, you can really have fun with Anderson, but he's obviously a very talented filmmaker. And I think maybe it's something in me with these directors. As their ambition grows, I miss the days when they had to work within a system a little more, and that's probably not a good stance to have because artists should be given the tools, especially talented artists, to make whatever they want to make. But I don't know, I kind of like going back to these movies where he didn't just get thrown money at him and the studio's like, we don't care if it makes money because you're Wes Anderson, and it brings a certain level of prestige to have your name attached to our studio, like where they actually had expectations for him and he couldn't just hand in whatever flight of fancy came to him in a dream.
Well, there's something to be said. I hate to say it as somebody on the older side of life. There's something to be said for youth and creativity. Like very few bands get better with age as a comparison. When you're young and scrappy and you just have to grind something out and you're working with very little, somehow that art that comes out of that is often the best.
And actually that leads really well into the movie I watched this week because it's also a young filmmaker just getting his start, doing kind of a small movie to hopefully get his foot in the door in Hollywood. I watched Jurassic World Dominion.
Oh, wow. You're always scouring the scrappy art house indie scene.
I know. I couldn't go to Cannes this year, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to see this. but actually it was playing at a local cinema near me, much to my surprise and delight. No, I saw the fucking Jurassic World movie. It's so stupid, but weirdly I liked it. I feel like I'm a crazy weirdo for being the only person I've ever spoken to that actually enjoyed this movie. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the nostalgia factor of it, because they do bring back Sam Neill and Laura Dern, Jeff Goldblum. And to be fair, they've all come back for movies before. You know, this is not like we're getting the guys back for the first time since the original, but they've never all come back in the same movie. And they've also...
Do they like put that on screen? Excuse me, folks, please note, this is special. Please clap.
It kind of feels like it though, because it was like, they're making a big deal about this, but like Sam Neill was the star of Jurassic Park 3. He's the guy, you know? And Jeff Goldblum is the star of The Lost World. So it's not like they refused to go back to the well. Jeff Goldblum was even in the last one that sucked so bad, Fallen Kingdom. But what I liked about the movie, and I think it's my favorite of the new trilogy, is it's trying to do some stuff. It's got a lot of ideas about what a Jurassic World movie can be.
Okay.
The problem with it is that it has too many ideas and it indulges them all just a little bit and refuses to commit to one. At times it's like a globe-trotting Mission Impossible type movie or a Bourne movie. At times it's like a real panicked crypto techno thriller with, you know, a bad pharmacological company doing evil things like Michael Clayton, but with dinosaurs.
That's fun.
And then I'm like, these are all cool ideas, but because you know it's the last one of the trilogy, you just take them all and just fucking throw like, here's a sequence where we're going to pretend we're doing this kind of movie. And here's a sequence where we're going to pretend there's this kind of movie. And the movie ends up having no point of view or tone that it can really stick to. But at this stage with these movies, I'm just happy to see them trying anything.
Yeah. Too many ideas is better than no ideas.
And I find Bryce Dallas Howard very winning. I enjoy her performances. She's one of my favorite actresses. Chris Pratt is fine. I feel like his character has devolved over the course of these movies, where he was kind of like a little wise ass in the first one, and now he's just like a rugged mountain man. You know, like he has no
doing Tim Allen grunts at this point.
More or less, yeah. Like he's got no discernible personality anymore. And I've watched all three of these in the past month or so because my son likes dinosaur movies. I won't show him Fallen Kingdom though, because I think that one's a little scary for him.
Okay,
but I watched it myself to see if it was too scary to show him, and determined it was. But yeah, it's like a gradual decline. It's almost like he's got some degenerative disease that saps him of personality. Because in the first one, he's like cracking jokes and being fun and funny. Not, you know, a real jokester Chris Pratt role, but certainly better than what we've got in this one.
I feel like Pratt's going in that direction. Do you think he might be redlining his script, coming back? Like, I crossed out all the
100%.
jokes. I want to be serious now.
Yes, 1,000%, because look at the Tomorrow War, which is a movie that kind of came and went.
Or don't look at the Tomorrow War if you want to save 2 hours of your life.
Hey, I'll watch anything with Mike Mitchell and Sam Richardson in it. Yeah. They're hilarious, two of my favorite comedic actors. But that's the thing, that movie is just stuffed with comedians in every bit part because Chris Pratt can't be bothered to say a fucking punchline anymore.
No. Is he the dad in that? Is that he's like a super dad?
Yes.
Super earnest dad?
That movie had some cool ideas, but it didn't.
It didn't play out. Yeah, it had a cool concept.
Yeah, but it's worth watching, in my opinion, just for Sam Richardson, one of the truly best actors of his generation.
And one of the great time-traveling sci-fi actors.
It's true. He's done a
battled aliens and he battled Scrooge. Or no, he tried to recruit
Scrooge.
He
for the war.
Scrooge to battle the robots.
One of my favorite season 1, I Think You Should Leave sketches. But yeah, I guess we've pontificated about Wes Anderson and Jurassic World as much as we can. It's finally time to talk about Independence Day, Resurgence. I guess I'll start by asking you, what were your thoughts about the original movie, and then what you remember about this at all?
I remember the original movie being a serious phenomenon. The TV commercial of the White House getting blown up was just an indelible image, absolutely seared into the pop cultural consciousness that summer. And I don't remember being crazy for the movie. I remember appreciating it, but I was probably already too old to be wild for this movie. So I liked the original, but was not a huge devotee of it. And then this one came out and I think it missed me, or I successfully missed it. Yeah, that was a good dodge on my part.
Yes. The original Independence Day will always be one of my fondest movie-going memories. I remember I was visiting my Aunt Kay in Maine when the movie came out. I had just turned 10 years old, and she took me to this old movie theater in Maine that was like a real, like it felt like you were going to the opera. You know, it had like the red velvet seats and the balconies and shit. Really cool movie theater. I haven't looked into it. I'm certain it's gone now because movie theaters like that just didn't survive past a certain point. Then yeah, we saw Independence Day and I fucking loved it. You know, as a 10-year-old kid into aliens and spaceships and guns. It's got everything you could want. Will Smith coming into his own as one of the truly great action heroes.
Just being a ham and a goof.
Yeah, and Jeff Goldblum being super weird in blockbusters, which has been like his calling card for the past 30 years. I loved the first Independence Day and I still really enjoy it. I rewatched it when I knew this was coming up on the schedule and I had a night where I didn't know what to watch. I was like, I'll throw on Independence Day to see if it's still good. And you can see the seams and spots, but it still holds up pretty well. And a lot of what it has going for it, this movie ignored. And that's what we can get into. But yeah, same as you, when this movie came out, I was well aware of it, but it lost me from the trailers, the marketing, some of the casting decisions, not having Will Smith come back, even though his star had pretty much faded by this point to a pretty significant degree. None of it felt like Independence Day to me. And I think that's something that holds very true if you watch the whole movie.
Really interesting in our very current context of how bad an idea it seems to wait 20 years to make a sequel to a summer blockbuster.
Someone just did it very well.
Yeah. Roland Emmerich set the bar very low that you're going to fall on your face if you try it. And Tom Cruise said, hold my F-16.
Yeah, as of this recording, it was just announced today with the weekend grosses, Top Gun became the first movie to gross $1 billion in 2022.
Wow.
So that's
legit.
Pretty significant. Also, this is the first weekend that 4 movies have made over $20 million at the box office, because we had Top Gun Maverick, Jurassic World Dominion, The Black Phone, the Ethan Hawke horror movie that actually looks really good. I'm excited to see that one. And Elvis made about $35 million its opening weekend.
I'm surprised about that. I thought that would just fall on its face.
That movie looks terrible, but apparently the reviews aren't bad. It had an $85 million budget. I'm curious to see if we'll be able to cover it if it falls off in its second week. All right, so we got off topic again. You could see how reluctant I am to talk about Independence Day Resurgence. I do not give a shit about this movie. But it's interesting. We were talking about it. You had sent me a message like, you're going to be mad at me, but I actually don't hate this movie. And I was like, oh man. But you were about halfway done with it, I think, at that point, or maybe not even.
That's the clue. I was at the halfway mark.
And I texted you when I was like halfway through it. And I was like, I haven't finished it, but it's not as bad as I remember. And then we both watched the second half of the movie. And we're like, okay, there it is.
Yeah.
There's so much fat on this cut of beef. Man, this movie is just full of pointless subplots that go nowhere. This movie could have been like an hour and 15 minutes if they fucking cut some shit that they didn't need.
I also think it says something about the disaster movie genre in that the setup is maybe the more fun part. Now, there's obviously some fun in the payoff, big things falling apart, exploding, tidal waves, destruction. That's part of why people go see these movies. But that anticipation of swinging around the globe, meeting different casts of characters in different places, the story dropping you little hints about what's coming and the dread of it and the anticipation, all that stuff is fun. And Emmerich's not bad at executing that stuff. So like this movie is just doing its work in the first half. And you're like, okay, this is fun. He's got the people. I see what their connections are. And in the second half, then he tries to indulge in the characters, which a lot of them are really bad.
Very thin.
Yeah, the young half of the cast is,
yeah,
it's just not fun and not cool to get into. So then it becomes more cheesy and it becomes more tedious as it tries to work through all these plots. But, you know, we had to be fair. The original is super long. I went back and watched it. I don't know if I'm watching the theatrical cut.
It's like 2 hours, 25 minutes, I want to say, around
Yeah,
there.
it's super long. It's so indulgent. And Randy Quaid, who I just never am interested in seeing on screen, he has a 45-minute subplot in this movie where he gets huge amounts of screen time. His family of 5 or 6 homely children get incredible amounts of screen time.
Children that would never be birthed from Randy Quaid's fucking Thunderbird wine-ridden sperm.
It's just a weird thing. And then they knock that off in this movie too. Well, we're getting too deep into it. We broke the ice on it.
I know.
And so maybe we should step back.
We will have to step back, but I wanted to comment on what you said about the setup working. When I rewatched this, I thought the setup does work, but it also does some stuff that actually undermine the second half for me and make it feel like not an Independence Day movie. And what I mean is, I thought it was cool seeing how society has advanced technologically by harvesting the alien weaponry and using it to, you know, for transportation, for weaponry, military defense, all this stuff. But then that kind of undermines one of the things I really liked about the first Independence Day, which is like humans felt like a ragtag militia trying to battle this technologically advanced enemy that was just so much more powerful, and we had to find creative ways to battle them. And here it's just like, well, we have the same weapons they have. Now it's just a firefight. And that's boring. You know, like,
yeah. The only thing they could do is just up the size and scale of the aliens. Like, we should be on an even playing field. But no, their ship is 3,000 miles wide.
Which is just an insane, like, it's such a perfect distillation of Roland Emmerich as a filmmaker. Like, how big should it be? 3,000 miles? Okay, sure. Like, he has no idea what 3,000 miles is. He just threw out a big number, or Dean Devlin, either one. They're pretty much interchangeable in my mind. But that's a ludicrous size for a spaceship.
It is. But actually, on that point, I give him credit. Because if you're going to go big, go too big. He intentionally went too big. That is too big. You cannot conceive of that. You can't show it on screen.
It's like a third the size of Earth. It's absurd. But yeah, there is one shot when it first lands and it finally does the part where it's like, all right, I'm attached now. It zooms out for one shot from space.
Okay.
And you see it.
Yeah, that's the goofy part. I guess they didn't linger on that because that's where it's silly.
Because the size of that thing, like, first of all, something tells me they did not consult any actual scientists to be like, what would something this size landing on Earth actually do to Earth? It would not turn into Inception, where, you know, the streets magically bend because of the gravity, but that's what they went with.
I think Jeff Goldblum was the scientific advisor on this. They're just like, you're a scientist, right? Or are you an actor? I'm never quite sure.
And he had taken a bunch of mushrooms and he was just like, let me tell you how it's going to work.
He's playing some jazz piano and just riffing on space science.
I think Maika Monroe was one that said, like, in between takes, he would just like bust out an acoustic guitar and start playing songs and have everyone join in. I was like, yeah, that's some Jeff Goldblum shit.
He's such a dude. Yeah.
He's such a dude. All right, you want me to talk about the long and winding road that this movie took to arrive in front of our eyeballs?
Yeah, please explain how this thing happened.
All right. In 1996, Roland Emmerich released what would be his most enduring, critically acclaimed, and commercially successful film, Independence Day, grossing $817 million against the $75 million budget and cementing Will Smith's status as bona fide action star. A sequel for Independence Day should have been a no-brainer. It wouldn't be quite so easy, though, as the road to a second Independence Day film was filled with false starts and hurt feelings.
Like a junior high school track meet.
Devlin was paid a large sum to write the sequel immediately after the film's success, but he ended up returning the money because he could not come up with a script that satisfied him. An idea was floated as early as 2001, with Devlin saying 9/11 influenced him to get working on an Independence Day sequel. I guess you never know when inspiration will strike. Emmerich would dash fans' hopes in 2004, however, stating he and Devlin tried to find a concept they liked for a sequel but came up short and abandoned the idea. Sometime between then and 2009, Emmerich had a big change of heart and now said he wanted to make 2 sequels to turn the Independence Day movie into that old franchise standby, a trilogy.
Ah yes, the 3rd of the 4th of July.
By 2011, Devlin had confirmed that he and Emmerich had cracked the idea for the 2 sequels and written out a treatment for them. And the gang was all coming back. Bill Pullman, Jeff Goldblum, Judd Hirsch, Vivica A. Fox, Brent Spiner, and more reprised their roles. Especially the star of the first movie, who had gone on to become one of the biggest actors of all time, right? Sadly, no, as Smith wanted $50 million to shoot the 2 sequels back to back, and Fox was not willing to pay that.
Now that's what I call a close encounter.
He was written out of the new movies, and Emmerich said in 2013 that the film would focus on a new generation of heroes, including the children of some of the main characters from the original. Fox eventually balked at filming 2 sequels back to back and financed 1 sequel with the understanding another would be made if the first was successful.
Now that's what I call a close encounter.
Given a $165 million budget entitled Independence Day Resurgence, the film went about filling in the cast. Jesse T. Usher was cast as Dylan Hiller, stepson of Smith's character Stephen Hiller from the original, and Liam Hemsworth was cast as Jake Morrison, a new hero because this movie doesn't have enough fucking characters. There was a bit of controversy with the casting of President Whitmore's daughter, played by Mae Whitman in the original and Maika Monroe in the sequel. Whitman, who is still a working and successful actor as an adult, indicated she was not asked to reprise the role based on her interactions with tweets decrying her recasting. Emmerich stated Whitman declined to return for the role, but many theorized she was not asked back as Monroe was more, quote, conventionally Hollywood attractive, end quote. Filmed in various locations across New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, London, Dubai, Singapore, and Los Angeles between April and August of 2015, a release date was set for June 24th, 2016 because, sure, close enough.
Now that's what I call a close enough encounter.
Tie-in novels and comic books were made, and a heavy advertising push was in full effect, but couldn't hide the fact that this movie kinda sucks. Critics hated it, and it would get absolutely stomped at the box office, taking second place in its opening weekend with $41 million, as Finding Dory made $72.9 million in its second week. It fared better worldwide, eventually making $389.7 million, but still not enough to turn a profit, and all plans for a third movie were put on indefinite hold.
Poor Mae Whitman got Hollywooded out of this sequel.
We have to piece together what really went down from like her retweets, which is a very silly concept to try to use for like detective work. But I guess Anna Kendrick had tweeted out something like, this is bullshit. Mae should be coming back for this role, blah, blah, blah. And Mae Whitman retweeted that tweet and was liking other tweets that were like, it's fucked up. She wasn't asked to come back for this role. She's still an actor. She should be reprising this role. Because sometimes kid actors just end up not being actors. And in that case, it's totally fine to recast a role. It's fine to recast a role for a bunch of reasons, but Mae Whitman's delightful.
She's great. We loved her. We had her in The Zone on
Scott Pilgrim.
Scott Pilgrim, of course. One of my very favorite movies of all time, which I always forget the name of. And I feel like, yeah, the producers treated her like some kind of anhog. Like, so, I don't think I've met Egg.
Roland Emmerich said her, but yeah, kind of fucked up. And I tend to believe her over Roland Emmerich. I don't know. He's got a history of kind of weird, sketchy behavior in Hollywood. Not like a cancelable way, but just casting Roger Ebert lookalike as the mayor of New York, and God, like he's a very petty, childish person at
They were trying to create a gorgeous young Hollywood star cast that would sell this movie to a young adult audience. So that's one of my main theories about what's going on in half of this movie is that it's a young adult film and they wanted a tall, thin blonde and whatever ideal they had in their minds about what a Hollywood starlet should look like. And they got Maika Monroe, who's great.
Yeah, nothing against her, to be clear. She's in some movies I really enjoy, and I think she gives good performances. She's not good in this.
No, is anybody good in this? To be fair, Goldblum.
Maybe Goldblum, but
Yeah.
he's just being Goldblum. You know what you're getting when you cast him. I found like there are characters from the original that I really enjoyed that I find repellent in this movie, like Judd Hirsch as Julius Levinson, like Brent Spiner as Dr.
Brent Spiner's
Oaken.
too much.
He's a fucking asshole in this movie. Even Pullman's kind of like crazy guy routine in the beginning, I thought got tiresome. I don't know. Maybe my goodwill towards this movie was just non-existent, so I'm not willing to give anyone credit.
I had a little bit of goodwill for Pullman still, but yeah, everybody's on thin ice and a lot of them skate right into the water.
I want to get into my very specific problems with this movie, but I feel like we need to go through the storyline to do that.
Just before we jump into the story, let me hit one more thing on the young adult thing.
Get me. Yeah. I like this theory, so I'm interested in hearing it.
Part of my theory, and I looked this up. This movie, 2016, right? Guess what movies come out starting in 2014, trilogy, one a year. The first two made 300 million each. Big hits. These movies are Divergent, Insurgent, and Allegiant. And where do you think the fucking title of this movie came from?
Resurgence. Wow. That's clever. That's some good sleuthing there.
Like that came to mind first. I'm like, why is it called a resurgence? It literally, I guess, makes sense. Something coming back can be called a resurgence. But it makes the title long and clunky, and it's not a particularly fun word to say or evocative word on its own. But I'm like, It kind of reminds me of Divergent. And I'm like, yeah, that came out 2 years before, and it's a big young adult success full of young stars.
Fucking Robert Schweinke haunting us from beyond the grave of his career. The director of R.I.P.D. He's back.
Oh.
He's back to get us because he did the last two of that trilogy, didn't he?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's familiar now. I remember talking about that.
Yeah, he did Insurgent and Allegiant. Jeez. My guess was going to be The Maze Runner, by the way, and I was like, I don't know where you're going with this.
Yeah, that would have been harder to connect. But yeah, that's just my little fan theory, but I feel like it's
No, I think you're
plausible.
onto something with this casting. First, we got Liam Hemsworth. What was Liam Hemsworth's breakout role? What movie series was that? The Hunger Games, popular YA adaptation.
For sure.
Jesse T. Usher, famous for The Boys, a popular YA show.
Yeah.
No, that's a joke. But no, that checks out. But you might have cracked the code. I wonder how much of that was Emmerich and how much was the studio, because there's some other decisions they make that you feel the studio's hand very heavily in.
Yeah, I would easily suspect that Emmerich was not hip enough to make that call, but that the studio is like, oh, no, we got to do this, buddy.
That checks out. I think you've come up with a solid theory here, and I wholeheartedly endorse it.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get into the story of this movie, such as it is.
All right, here we go. 20 years after the world defeated an alien invasion, some people who had a psychic connection with the aliens start feeling funny and having visions of a circle thingy, including former President Whitmore, played by Bill Pullman, and Area 51 Research Chief Dr. Oaken. Meanwhile, in Africa, Space Defense Director David Levinson, the Jeff Goldblum character, meets up with renowned alien-killing warlord Dikembe Mbutu, who's also been having visions. Suddenly, a little round ship that seems to resemble these visions appears on the moon, and the Space Defense Force shoots it down into a crater. Disobeying orders, space tugboat pilot Jack, played by Liam Hemsworth, takes Levinson and his friends to investigate the crash. Then the alien situation gets really serious when a ship 3,000 miles wide appears, destroying our newly completed moon base and all of Earth's other space defenses to boot. The giant ship touches down over the Atlantic and begins drilling, clearly aiming to suck out Earth's delicious molten core.
Please don't go back and leave all this in, but you called him Jack, and his name is Jake. And I think that's a perfect encapsulation of how little you care about this movie. Yeah, don't correct it.
Okay, I'm looking through the notes. Did I not see Jake elsewhere in this? Did I Jack him throughout the movie?
I don't know.
I feel like I knew his name was Jake, and that was a momentary thing. But yes, I think you're correct. It doesn't matter.
He's just Liam Hemsworth.
None of this matters. It's Liam Hemsworth. He's fucking with us the whole time.
I love that the movie opens with the aliens watching what appears to be the DVD footage of Bill Pullman's speech from the first movie. Like, where do they get this camera angle from? Literally, they're just playing scenes from the first movie.
A clip of the film, yeah.
With the cheesy long finger of the alien, like pressing stop when the clip's done. I was like, this is so bad.
Yeah,
but if it had embraced that cheese and gone for that vibe throughout, it might have been more fun.
Yeah, when you see their scary faces and their glossy eyes, some of that's kind of fun. But I don't know.
It's a cool design. It's always been a cool creature design. Like a little standard. I just love that we can't get past 2 arms, 2 legs for aliens. Like everyone's got to look like us, but just a little different. But, they set that up in 1996 when that wasn't quite as big a trope, I guess. It's hard to walk it back now, so you can't really fault them for that.
No, and this movie, like so many others, wants to try to link back to our entire cultural history of alien tropes. So they're like, oh yeah, these are the same aliens from Roswell. And so everything you've ever seen about grays with smooth skin and bulbous eyes applies.
Which was one of my favorite aspects of the original, kind of tying it into the real world mythology around aliens in a pretty effective way. But now like Area 51 is up and running as this aliens aren't a secret anymore. It's this very big research facility. They've got at least dozens, if not hundreds of aliens in captivity there.
Yeah.
That are dormant. They've been asleep since the aliens left last time. But
yeah. What do they eat? What do they breathe? How did they keep them alive so long?
It's such a half-baked idea that, like, first of all, Dr. Oken also has been in a coma for 7,000 days, and he doesn't even have a breathing tube in, does he? He's just laying there.
He's just been chilling, trying on little sweaters that his hubby was. Those two, are they married in the first film? Are they a couple? Am I reading the relationship between
they're not well, so it was a bit of a controversial thing too that I didn't get into in the monologue, but Roland Emmerich was like, look guys, there's going to be a gay couple in IG2. We're really excited to take blockbuster movies and make them more inclusive. And then, you know, there's a couple scenes where they call each other babe. That's really all you get, and maybe like a little hand holding. So he cleared, like, he meant this to be some kind of big statement for inclusivity, but was criticized for falling short a little bit, kind of half-assing it.
It's even pretty subtle in this.
I'm talking about in this one. In the first one, I don't think it was written that they were a couple.
Oh, so there were no babes in that?
No, there were not. I think they retconned it into this movie for that they have always been a couple.
Okay.
But it's, like you said, it's very subtle, even in this. And Dr. Oken is fucking mean to him when he wakes up. The whole movie, he's just such a dick to him.
Yeah, Oken is just a weird jerk in general. And it's almost like they gave him cocaine to bring him out of his coma. He's wild-eyed and crazy.
But so that was another talking point around this movie's release, that they made a big to-do about the fact that they're going to have a gay couple. And then they kind of, you know, their hands gingerly touched once and they're like, there you go. You guys are happy now. That's all you get. We're still doing this shit with Lightyear. You know, one little peck on the lips is supposed to be some kind of big step forward. I think it's all a little, it's not enough after decades of, you know, being on the wrong side of this shit.
Yeah, especially in this movie. As you say, it's quite subtle. I was like, am I picking up what they're laying down? I guess I was.
Let's talk about the moon base in this movie that is now like a fully functioning college campus because everyone who works there is like 19 or whatever. I love the stupidity of Jake, our Liam Hemsworth character, who's ostensibly the lead hero of the movie now, talking to, are they explicitly fiancés yet or just girlfriend?
I think they're engaged, aren't they? I think they say fiancé.
Oh, yes, she does. You're right. In their video chat on QQ, China's leading social media platform. Patricia Whitmore, played by Maika Monroe, is video chatting with Jake Morrison from the moon, and they keep having these weird power surges and outages and everything gets fuzzy. And he's like, we're just working on, you know, a research facility on the moon using alien technology. I'm sure it malfunctioning. It means nothing. That's probably fine. It's been happening for a week now, but we're not worried about it.
He's so bored. He's ready to die on the moon at a moment's notice.
He hates being on the fucking moon because he's not even allowed to work anymore. So he just has to hang out like his room. Gets grounded after he heroically saves a piece of machinery.
He fucks up the big gun and then he saves it, which is an interesting scene. It's interesting that they gave these heroic characters such a clear fuck up. The one guy just totally goofs it and nearly ruins this multi-trillion-dollar gigantic space weapon that's the cornerstone of our defense against the aliens.
Which gets ruined anyway, like half an hour later.
Oh yeah, it doesn't do the job it's meant to do, but still you got to give it a shot. But what's funny in that scene is it's a fleet of tugboats that are pushing this giant thing into place, and then it gets slightly off balance and every other tugboat flees. Like it's not their job to push things back into place, and only Jake goes, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not going to let it just fall just because it got off balance. I'm going to push it back upright. Like no one else thought to even try.
But it was his mistake that caused the thing to fall, right?
Yeah, he fucked it up. So, I mean, it was on him to fix it, but like it could have been on everyone else to give him a hand.
Why would you give that mistake to another character? Doesn't that make so much more sense? Have some like hapless dude who gets one line in the whole movie be like, oh no. And then he's got to like be the guy who swoops in and saves it.
I guess the point was that he needed to take the fall because he needed to be the unfairly punished hero. I don't actually know what the point was. Because his sidekick, his wingman, is the one who actually fucked it up and he covers for him. But there's no real point to that except that Jake is more noble and heroic than his little buddy.
His annoying little sidekick. They do drive home the point that like they're very loyal to each other, I guess, by doing that. But like it doesn't pay off. It's not fruitful in any way in the second act.
No, because like as you said, the solution to all the problems in this movie is just shoot your guns harder.
Hold them tighter when you pull the trigger and it'll do better or something. I don't know.
Let me comment on Hemsworth when we're talking about him. His performance was really interesting, even though it's totally trite, he is smirking his way through every single line of the movie. Now, okay, this is a character who's irreverent, he's cocky, he's full of himself, and okay, he takes some things lightly, he's bored with his job. Oh, you grounded me, I'll make a little wisecrack about that. Okay, he's smirking when he's delivering all those lines, even though shit is going bad for him. But he continues to smirk through lines, including when he consoles Dylan, whose mom just died later in the film. It's a serious scene, and it's like, oh, you just watched your mother fall to her death. I'm sorry, dude. And he smirks through that. Like, it's like he decided this movie is a ridiculous piece of shit, and I'm going to wink at the audience in every single scene by smirking after every line.
I don't know why. I don't think it helps the movie. I think it undermines its more dramatic moments. Having him there. He's also like a character, when you examine the movie as a whole, he's not necessary. He doesn't even function as an audience surrogate because he knows more than the audience about the technology and stuff. He doesn't really go through the labor of explaining it like to another character out loud so that we can learn along with him. You know, like, why did he need to be in this movie? Why didn't you just have Dylan Hiller and Patricia Whitmore be a couple now if you wanted to go that route and have kids from the first one being involved and they have to have love interests? Because he's so unimportant, it makes Dylan Hiller unimportant too, because he just has nothing going for him except he's not Will Smith and his mom died. But aside from that, he's doing this. Why?
Yeah, you're right. There's some redundancies there, as they say in Office Land.
We need to downsize.
Yeah, they should have downsized this cast because you're absolutely right. Dylan should have had the love interest because he winds up without one.
Winds up with nothing to do.
Even the shitty sidekick wingman gets a love interest. It's overstuffed on the YA side.
I think their plan, my opinion is they were trying to have this movie be a transition movie between the old cast, and then the third movie would just be the new cast, so they needed more bodies. But a lot of this movie is setting up a sequel that never happened, and therefore it doesn't work as a movie on its own. What I thought was going to happen in the third one, if they ever made it, was the young kids all go to the alien planet with Eva from WALL-E, and they fight them on their own while Jeff Goldblum and Jeff Goldblum and Dr. Oaken advise them from like the command center on Earth. So you needed bodies to fill out the ships that are going to the alien planet that we would recognize. But then the movie never happened. So just worry about making a good fucking movie this time. And then you can retrofit whatever you need to for the threequel.
It's funny, that whole White House connection plot is like, okay, who's this young lady? Oh, she's the daughter of the ex-president. Oh, but she works for the current president. Oh, but she went to flight school with the stepson of the other hero, and she's engaged to the grounded pilot. And it's like, you're just figuring out why these people know each other. But in the end, except for her sort of helping her father go to his death, there's like very little setup and payoff in all those characters. You're just like, okay, I understand how they know each other. And that's the whole point of it.
It's literally just looking like, hey, look, you remember their parents, right? Well, they know each other too. It serves no purpose. And then you anchor the movie around this guy we have no investment in from the original movie, but you're so slavish to the original movie in other ways. It's just strange. It's a very strange movie. It feels like they just took studio notes and wrote a script. Like they wrote a script, got a bunch of studio notes, threw out the original script, and just wrote based on the studio notes. Like, hey, the Chinese box office is really important. Let's just put a Chinese lady in there. Who's popular? Let's get Angela Baby. Everything is just a note in this movie. It feels micromanaged.
Which goes against your whole story of the production, which is they slaved over finding the perfect idea for 17 freaking years before they could get started.
Yeah, but something tells me you don't give Roland Emmerich $165 million and are like, yeah, go crazy.
Yeah.
You're getting this money, but there's strings attached.
Yeah.
And that's the right way to do it because Roland Emmerich is not a good filmmaker. But also, you got to make sure the executives that are overseeing the project know what the fuck they're talking about too.
It's hard work. On a production this big and sweeping in scope, it's just hard to get all these things and make them all good.
On a production roughly 3,000 miles in diameter.
Yes.
Yeah, you really got to have your head on straight. So we kind of mentioned Dylan. I don't have much more to say about him. Jesse Usher is pretty bad in this movie.
Yeah, kind of, right?
Yeah, he's kind of a black hole of charisma, which we know is not his MO. Having seen him on The Boys, he's very captivating on that, I thought.
He's a weird character on The Boys. Everyone's a weird character on The Boys, but like he fits right in there and you're like, this guy's fucked up. And he inhabits that character, the A-Train character, really well. But here he's just so bland and so, it's kind of cringy.
And he does him no favors by constantly reminding us he is supposed to have been raised by Will Smith in this reality. He's not his biological son. He's his stepson that he ended up adopting. But still, there could not be more of a difference between the flair in the Will Smith performance, which is a very hammy performance, like you mentioned. He's really cheesing it up. But it works and it makes the movie fun. And he is just so, when I say he, I mean Jesse Usher as Dylan is so stoic and dry. There's just nothing there.
It's very kiddie. Like we're hammering on the young adult stuff, but a lot of those scenes and those lines because they're on the children's end of the young adult spectrum. They're like dumbed down and simplified emotions and bits of dialogue that get real cringy.
Yeah, they make a joke about, forgive me for not remembering his name. Who's Liam Hemsworth's little buddy?
Yeah.
Is that Nicholas Wright? No, it's Travis Tope as Charlie Miller.
Okay.
So yeah, the Charlie character, they make a joke about him being super young because he's 23 and a half, I think they say at some point. And I'm like, I think everyone in this $1 trillion space station looks like a fucking high school cafeteria. Like everyone acts, dresses, talks like they're fucking 17.
Yeah.
You know, why are you harping on this guy being super young when he's 23?
Yeah, it's Saved by the Bell kind of material for some of it.
Now, I want to talk about one of my biggest issues with this movie is that it keeps telling me about really cool stuff that happened that we'll never get to see. The subplot with Ubuntu, the warlord, which, by the way, David Levinson's just palling around with warlords all of a sudden now. They go through great lengths to call him a warlord.
Right.
He's not just, a local leader. No, they call him a warlord several times, which Central African warlords, kind of a rough history there to make him on the good guy's side. But I could give the movie credit for trying to approach a character like that from a more nuanced position and, the enemy of my enemy situation. But then we find out there's been a ground war in Africa between the aliens and Ubuntu's people for 20 years. I'm like, I want to see that fucking movie. I want to see these guys with machetes and some alien technology, like learning how to defeat the aliens in hand-to-hand combat and gaining ground and losing ground. Like, that's a cool fucking movie.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, it's been going on for 20 years, but we're not going to show you.
I mean, it's kind of fun to have that as a deep well to reference so that there's some missing history, but any of that stuff would have been more fun than most of what's in this movie.
One of the things this movie does really badly, I think, is action, surprisingly. Like any fight between the aliens and the human characters, you just tune out.
Yeah.
Which is not what you look for in an alien invasion action movie.
A lot of tentacles flailing and lights flashing.
And just lasers being shot back and forth, which is not the most captivating material, to be perfectly honest.
I feel like they tried to outdo Star Wars when they did the big battle, like too many ships on screen at one time, just flying in every single direction and shooting constantly.
In The Rise of Skywalker, that was like the big thing, all those ships at the very end. Again, I think the Star Wars movies that did that originally struck the right balance, but the constant push to do more and bigger, it ends up just being numbing as opposed to being more captivating.
And this movie definitely got sucked into that train.
We were on board for a while, and then when the action actually starts, it loses us, which it should be the other way around, If
they had doled it out in nice little juicy chunks instead of just beating us over the head with plots that we're going to take another 90 minutes to unwind.
I saw you asking if they pick up famous skyscrapers from Malaysia and Dubai and dump them on London. And the answer is yes, and probably the coolest shot in the movie. The ship actually sucks up landmarks and monuments from all over the world and dumps them on other cities. It's creative.
Yeah, they dumped the Petronas Towers and maybe the Burj Khalifa. I don't even know what we were seeing there.
I think it was the Burj Khalifa.
Some big skyscrapers that they picked up on their little trip to Asia, dropped off right along the Thames River. And it's horrifying. It's a tragic destruction of London, but that part of the payoff is maybe where you're still having fun with it.
But also, I understand the need to recoup and come up with a plan, but I feel like the destruction of these major American cities is never treated with any gravity at all. They're just like, oh, the Eastern Seaboard's it's a shit show. We got to move. We got to figure out what we're going to do next. It's like, no, man, 100 million people probably just died.
Yeah.
It's just on to the next set piece without ever considering the ramifications.
Everybody in New York City died except for Judd Hirsch, who skated free on his little fishing boat somewhere.
Why? I love Judd Hirsch, but he did not need to be in this movie. In a movie full of useless storylines, his is probably the uselessest. The most useless? Yeah, I'm very tired.
He's hard to take. He's hard to take. He's a great comic actor dating way back, and his lines, I don't know, it's oppressive.
Yes, oppressive is a good word. It really does grate on you after a while. All right, you ready to walk through the second half of the movie? Or the middle part of the movie?
Yeah, let's clean up this mess.
Former President Whitmore, Director Levinson, and various other characters regroup at Area 51. Levinson calls the current president, Elizabeth Lanford, in her bunker and tells her the mothership contains a huge alien queen that must be killed to stop the invasion. So Lanford orders an attack on the ship, but the aliens easily repel it, causing intrepid young pilots Jake and Dylan to crash land and get stranded deep inside the giant craft. Then the aliens strike back at Cheyenne Mountain, killing the president and the entire U.S. line of succession. Meanwhile, at Area 51, Dr. Oaken cuts open the recovered piece of the downed spherical ship to discover a spherical alien, who informs them that she's the Queen's arch-enemy, the head of a resistance group made up of refugees from planets who the Harvester aliens attacked in the past. Levinson hatches a plan to bait the Queen with a decoy of the sphere, and President Whitmore volunteers to sacrifice himself by flying the decoy ship and detonating a cold fusion bomb. I was just hit reading the synopsis by how similar this movie takes the easy way out, like Evolution did. By like, all right, we know we've got all these aliens and ships and all this cool stuff going on, but there's just one big lady that you got to kill. Just like there's one big blob that you got to shoot a bunch of shampoo up its ass, and then everything will be fine. You know, It's a tired trope. Like, bees don't just die when you kill the queen bee. I don't know why we keep letting people get away with this shit. Oh, if you killed the queen, the other aliens will just roll over and die, and you can pet them like little puppies. They'll show you their tummies.
It's kind of cheap and easy, and they explain it, and they go, well, what'll happen if we kill the queen? Well, other queens from somewhere else will immediately call these ships back, and so there won't be any more danger to us. But it does feel like
until the next time they come back, though, like it's not a long-term solution either.
Well, it's not, but that's why you need the third movie in the trilogy to really deal with this.
What is the last line of this movie? Like, let's go kick some alien ass or something stupid like that. Fucking
oh my God. Brand laying it on thick.
I know. It's not his fault. Fun little tidbit. My friend Matt, who is a constant listener of the show, a big supporter, but he grew his hair out and he had long gray hair. And we were out one day and somebody told him he looked like the scientist from Independence Day.
Oh, shit. Was he wearing a turtleneck sweater or what?
He was not. But every once in a while, like there'd be a lull in the conversation and someone would just go like, release me. And it was a good time had by all. Sorry, Matt, if you're listening. I don't say your last name at least. But like, did they think they were making Oaken into a fun, wise-ass know-it-all? I hate to keep harping on it, but I just found him really abrasive and mean.
I think you're right. He's supposed to be zany, like a mad scientist, and he's bossing people around. Get me my super laser. I'm going to cut shit open. But it all seems mean-spirited, or just he's like too high-strung and aggro.
Not to mention, I made a joke in passing about it before, but he woke up from a 7,000-day coma and is fine. He's walking around immediately using his voice. I don't need these movies to be fully accurate, but give me a scene of him walking around with a walker or needing a glass of water before he starts spewing lines out at his boyfriend, husband, whatever he is.
Or another solution, show that when he was in the hospital bed, he was strapped up to some super high-tech alien gear that was keeping his body in perfect shape by
little electrodes, making his muscles work. So he's not completely atrophied when he wakes up.
Yeah, he's just in a hospital gown in a regular old hospital bed, and he just jumps up after 20 years and starts walking through the facility.
Also, it's a really weird line to be like, hello, Brackish, you've been now in a coma for 7,300 days. And it's like, no one talks like that, man. That line is just so blatantly inserted to get the audience up to speed. It's like, I know exposition is a necessary evil in movies, but you can find more crafty ways to work it in.
Their idea of being crafty was not saying 20 years, was like counting the days. And like, that's how these scientists talk to each other. Well,
maybe pull out my fucking phone calculator. Like, how dare you? Just say 20 years. All right, what else?
Yeah. Was Bill Pullman in a coma this whole time too? He was pretty weird when we meet him again.
He was just crazy. He wasn't in a coma. He's just like slowly, his mental health has deteriorated as a result of his close contact with the aliens, which that in and of itself is a cool little layer that everyone who had direct contact with them is still feeling the ramifications 20 years later. I don't know that turning him into basically the Randy Quaid character, just kind of stumbling around and mumbling about queens and they're coming and all this stuff was the way to get it across, though.
Right, and covering notepads with this little scrawled pictures, little circle drawings. Can we talk about Bill Pullman, though, in general? I think starting from the first movie, I thought there was something wrong with him. I thought the character was supposed to be off in the first one. I'm like, who elected a president who was like a weird, zoned out weirdo? And then I went back and watched the movie. He's not that weird and zoned out, certainly not on the scale that he is in this movie. But he's so weird in this. And you go, okay, that's fine. That's the result of his alien
by design
telepathic communication that tweaked his brain. But then when he talks, does Bill Pullman have an affectation or a condition that affects his speech? Because he's talking like a pirate or like a wizard or something. It's
a pirate strange. Or a wizard. I need to know what the common theme between those two professions is.
I don't know. I'm interested to find out. Yeah, I think in the first scenes when he's living in a hotel room or wherever he lives and he's talking to his daughter and stuff.
He's just in the Lincoln. He's been in the Lincoln bedroom for 20 years.
Is that what it is? They left him in the White House?
No, I don't know.
They're like, they felt bad for the guy. He's talking more like a pirate. But then later on, when he gives the speech, he gives a mini version of the Bill Pullman speech about halfway through the movie. It's not the final rally, but it's like a midpoint rally. And that scene, he's talking more like a wizard. He has like a funny old wizard voice. But I'm like, does he do voices? Does he not talk normal? What's the deal with Bill Pullman?
I'm trying to think of movies I know him best from and trying to reverse engineer it from there and be like, do I remember anything interesting or different about his voice in those movies? And honestly, as sad as it may be, the movies I associate with Bill Pullman the most are Independence Day, of course. I don't think anyone would have a separate answer. Lake Placid, the killer alligator movie, and Spaceballs. And I think the one common thing I can pull from memory about his vocal performances in all those movies is he talks in like short clipped sentences and he cuts his words off very quickly.
Okay.
Which is almost, words are hard today.
Yeah, they always are.
Like that's running counter to your theory here. Because pirates like draw out syllables and have this, yarr.
He could have been like a clipped pirate though. And the sort of a clipping affectation could jibe with what I thought I was hearing. It's hard to square what you're hearing because his face is very handsome and is very heroic and even looking like the wild man with his grown out beard. He still has a presence. So when his voice comes out weird, it's hard to actually square what you're hearing and acknowledge that you're hearing something weird because you think
like
you're
they
going to know.
They didn't go far enough to make him seem unhinged, you mean?
I don't even know if that's part of his performance. I think he has a weird vocal affectation that he can't control, but that's my fan theory.
Well, now I'm going to rewatch some Bill Pullman movies in the next week or so.
No.
I didn't pick up on that. I'm curious if any listeners did. Let us know in the comments below the tweet that we send out.
Yeah,
with the
I might have been
episode,
crazed. I might have picked up some alien telepathic wavelengths and that might have distorted my mind. Bill Pullman may talk perfectly normally throughout this movie, so that'll be interesting to find out.
He's the rare man I think is less handsome with a beard. Like I think he looks better clean shaven. Not that it has anything to do with anything. That's just something. But like having the aliens talk through him with the tentacles again is the very definition of diminishing returns. Like you guys couldn't come up with another way, or is this just like fan service?
Or like smash him up against a stained glass window just to pull a little twist on it or something. It was like a really visual recreation of Oaken in the first movie.
It might be literally the same room they're in for all we know.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like you guys couldn't throw some flair on it. I like the stained glass idea. Give us something to look at. Work some religious imagery into the movie because the movie is very clinical and cold. Every base is just either white or stainless steel. There's not a lot of color in this movie unless you count the red and orange of explosions.
True.
One of the notes I had from this section is it's so hard to pay attention to this movie because this is where it starts to lose me. I think I had to watch the second half of this movie like 3 times to get straight what's going on.
Yeah.
But I find it strange that they bring so many characters from the original back and kill them or kill them off screen.
Yes.
It almost feels spiteful in a sense. Like, why would you kill Constance Spano, who was aide to the president in the original and Jeff Goldblum's ex-girlfriend / new love interest? But they're just like, oh yeah, she died in a car crash. I think there's like a throwaway line. We killed Stephen Hiller off screen. Like, you couldn't explain it away. He's off somewhere else because maybe this movie makes a bunch of money. You can have these people back. And what's the harm in leaving it open?
I think in the Goldblum situation, it's because they wanted to set up a new love interest for him. So they're like, we better...
With the Charlotte Gainsbourg character? Yeah,
we better make it easy and just kill off his ex.
Another character we don't fucking need.
No,
and
totally
really serves no purpose except, like you said. But he already has a love interest. Why can no one just be happily married in this movie?
Everyone's been through some shit. But like you're saying, maybe the Goldblum love interest in this movie was set up to be holding down the fort in the sequel while the youngsters went off to fight the aliens.
We're seeing too much of the wheels turning, Like we're seeing the thought process of the studio making this movie. And that's never where you want your mind to wander while you're watching a movie. You refuse to be swept up in it because nothing really makes sense. And it's all so transparently there to sell the next movie, which is almost insulting in a way. It's like, I gave you my money. Not that I gave him any money, but I'm here in the theater now and all you're doing is telling me, don't worry so much about this. The next one's going to be cool.
It's not the feeling you want to get.
That's fucking annoying. I'd be pissed if I paid $14 to go see this in a movie theater. That's all I have about this section.
Should we try to do like a good movie would and accelerate the pace as we get towards the end?
Let's do it.
All right.
Let's introduce some stupid, pointless subplots while we're at it.
Sure. There's time for that. Inside the mothership, the downed human pilots steal some alien fighters and break out. Meanwhile, the Queen and her minions arrive at Area 51 and start their attack. Whitmore's daughter, Patricia, commandeers her own jet so she can help her dad complete his suicide mission, and he flies the bomb right into the Queen's ship and blows it up. But it turns out the Queen has her own personal shield, and she survives, emerging and rampaging her way towards Area 51 in search of the real sphere. Patricia manages to knock out the Queen's shield, and her pilot buddies arrive just in time to join the attack in their stolen alien ships. Despite the Queen's final furious attempts to defend herself with a phalanx of her minions, our hero pilots heroically break through and kill her, causing all the other aliens on Earth to pack it up and leave us alone.
I love that the solution to killing the queen was literally just shoot her more.
Yeah.
Like, I know you guys have been shooting her for 45 minutes, but just not enough.
Fly harder, you guys.
It's just so lazy.
You pointed out that the Goldblum solution in the first movie was cheesy, upload a virus and then let that break through the shields or whatever. This time they just broke through the shields, just like Patricia broke through the shields by shooting a lot. She's like, well, what if I fly up behind the queen and I just shoot at her a bunch? And okay, that worked. It broke down her shield. But she took you out with one last swipe. So, okay, someone else is going to have to get the kill shot. And then they're like, oh, we're stuck in a hurricane. She swarmed all the ships around her. And Liam Hemsworth, wait a minute, did you say hurricane? Hurricane has an eye. Eye is what I use to look through the sight of my gun. I'm going to shoot her with my gun.
This is like a trope on South Park, too. There's like a whole thing where you get to say like one word and somebody extrapolates a whole theory about how to solve a complex problem with it. Also, that's really stupid for another reason, because aliens don't follow the rules of weather. They just said it's like a hurricane as a throwaway line to explain that there's a lot of fucking aliens there. And he somehow is like, well, they must be adhering to the exact form of a hurricane that nature takes. Yeah. So this is definitely going to work. No, if the movie had any balls, he would have had that stupid ass idea and it wouldn't have worked.
It doesn't make any sense if you break it down. For anyone who hasn't seen this, there's like a squadron of all the little fighter ships and they're whipping around. The queen has lost her,
It's much more of a tornado than a hurricane, yeah.
You're right. And like she doesn't have her shield at this point, so she whips all the little fighter ships around her. She's gigantic, by the way. So there's hundreds of them flying around her. But they're not flying around her because of wind, because of a high pressure and a low pressure front meeting each other and forming a large gradient in air pressure.
Holy shit, Dan, do you actually know why a hurricane happens?
I'm just spitballing here, but I think that it has something to do with air of different temperature meeting each other, and then they start to swirl around. But these ships are swirling around her because she's the queen and she commands them. They're like, oh, well, if we just fly into the center, that'll be the quiet part of the storm. But guys, there's no storm. There's a lady controlling your ship.
Because they're alien fighters.
So they're just like, well, let's use the proton. What do they call the blaster? Everything is a...
They call it I don't fucking care is what they call it. How about that?
Is it fusion? The fusion is, the word fusion...
That's the bomb that Pullman drops is a fusion bomb.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's in two of the key technologies that save the day in this film. The cold fusion bomb is what you need to blow up the aliens, and the fusion drive is the thing that you kick in that blasts your ship out of a hurricane and into firing position. Kind of lazy.
Yeah. Was this movie financed by Big Fusion?
It was sponsored by Gillette Fusion. There's a razor ad at the end.
So we're talking about pointless subplots. We haven't even mentioned the two most pointless that factor into the end here, I guess. Not really, but they're there. They're present anyway. They don't really factor in. Judd Hirsch ends up picking up a bunch of kids in a school bus and driving them to Area 51, where his school bus is then hijacked by his son David, played by Jeff Goldblum, who now it's his turn to drive the school bus around while getting chased by the alien. And then there's also a bunch of guys on a boat watching the Earth's core get sucked up, because that's another thing that's happening here is the Earth's core is getting sucked up.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
There's a bunch of guys on a boat watching it and giving a countdown. Like Roland Emmerich, I know I've mentioned it before, it bears repeating. He's not a good filmmaker, and he has very rudimentary ideas of how you build tension. His ideas of how to build tension are you need kids in danger and animals in danger. And because of the circumstances of this movie, having children in danger didn't really make sense. He literally busses them in.
Yeah.
It's so on the nose, but I'm sure he had no idea he was doing it.
They come a long way to get in front of that queen and get in trouble.
That very moment that the big battle's happening, the school bus arrives. Did they try putting out the little stop sign that you're not allowed to pass? Maybe the queen would have had to stop.
It's a big ticket if you don't stop.
You guys are not using the tools you have at your disposal. You got a school bus. You've got that halo stop sign that no one can go by.
Right.
And you blew it. But those are two very pointless subplots that take up at least tens of minutes. The guys on the ship are maybe 10 minutes of our time, maybe a little less. But yeah, Judd Hirsch's whole storyline is probably 20 minutes of screen time that didn't need to be there. Explain it away, Explain his absence away somehow.
But at least that part is emotional. Like they're trying to go for an emotion. Okay, this is the father of one of the main heroes, and these are children we've never met before, but still it's children in jeopardy. And like he's helping them through this disaster. It's a disaster movie, so they're dealing with disaster and they're getting into jeopardy. And you can understand why that would, maybe if it was done well, it would pull on your heartstrings. The other one is strictly plot device. It's we need to get a ticking clock going on when the aliens are going to punch through the Earth's core and everything's going to be done for. And how do we do it? We float a random scavenger ship out in the Atlantic and try to make them entertaining by making them a bunch of drunk scallywags, but they're pretty soulless and it really feels like wasted time.
I don't think any of them even get a name. Also, we've seen the power that the aliens have. They flew a fucking ship 3,000 miles wide, as dumb as that sounds. That's what they do. They wipe out our moon base in one fell swoop. Like, they are extremely powerful, but it takes them days to drill to the Earth's core with all their technology.
And I was thinking that based on the ship is, like you said, when you see it on the planet, it's a third the size of the whole planet. What are they getting out of sucking out these planets? It's like they're just going for bubble tea, like a fun little side trip for them. You guys want to go out and suck up some molten cores? Yeah, I'd be down for that.
And you can't say it's random because they waited exactly 20 years. So they're trying to make a point with the timing.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just pissed. This is more about revenge than any resource gathering.
I guess once you start building ships that big, you're beholden to that. You're like, do you know how much molten core it takes to just maintain this ship? We got to be constantly sucking up planets left and right.
Right. You've built yourself an albatross.
It's
hanging
tough.
around your neck.
I start to feel bad for them.
Don't feel bad for anything related to this movie.
Now, who typed this note? We have a note in our notes that says the Queen is kind of cool. Did you write that or did I write that?
Yeah, I wrote that.
I thought that too. I thought it so much that I thought I might have written it. Despite everything we're complaining about, which is largely Judd Hirsch and a school bus full of annoying kids, the Queen rampaging across the salt flats, she kind of looks cool. She's a kind of a good design, and at this giant scale thundering around is kind of fun.
Yeah, I like how she runs almost like an ape, like a great ape. She's got that kind of
on her knuckles,
that posture. And I'm a sucker for a good kaiju. But my issue with her is that I feel like her size was inconsistent from shot to shot.
Probably.
Like how big is she? She's bigger than a dinosaur, but she's not as big as Godzilla.
Okay,
is she like King Kong sized?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know how big is that. 100 feet tall?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we weren't always given a good indication of what her size is. But I give the movie some credit for shooting the big showdown with her in the daytime, because a lot of kaiju movies rely on bad weather or darkness, like fucking King of the Monsters.
We complained about that.
I'm getting mad about King of the Monsters.
In the past, I've heard that story.
But we were super pissed because you had these awesome designed monsters and you just show them in thunderstorms. You literally make one of the characters bring thunderstorms with him, so that you never have to show them, probably because, of budgetary reasons. But they really are like, they roll out this queen and they're like, you're going to look at her. You're going to see every angle of her in the daylight. It's not even just the daylight. She's in the desert, like stark white ground. There's nowhere to hide. And I think, they spent their effects budget wisely in this sequence because she looks convincing. There was no point where I called it out. There were other scenes in this movie that had some shoddy effects. One in particular that I remembered was when the aliens start celebrating in their cells when the queen is coming. The CGI of the aliens in their cells is like, they spent like a week on it and we're like, that's fine. Who's going to see it? But we all saw it. But here, no, they stuck the landing with that big sequence visually. But in terms of the action itself, it's boring. So the queen is cool. The sequence is not.
Yeah. And maybe it's the resolution of it, because something about that dumb cyclone of ships and then just blasting was not satisfying.
You had a note that I wanted to address because I agree with this now. It didn't cross my mind in theory, but they sacrifice President Whitmore, Bill Pullman's character. He flies into the mothership and then blows it up, but it doesn't work. It blows up the ship, but doesn't kill the queen, and he's still super dead. And I feel like it just comes and goes and they move on really quickly.
Maybe they didn't make enough of it because it's the false victory moment, which is fun in a movie with big stakes and a big giant battle. It's a very sad moment. Like his daughter literally escorts him to the edge as far as she can go. And then he's like, all right, I'll take it from here. I'm going to fly into her ship and this will be the end of us. She's like, bye, Dad. I don't know if she even says bye, Dad, or anything sentimental, but then he flies up to the queen and he says, let go of her, you bitch, or whatever, his alien's moment. And he blows up. And instead of making it plausible that that was the victory, you show his finger on the button. And then there's this really weird pew pew noise. It goes pew pew. And then a really quick cut, less than a second, where you see the explosion. Then cuts right to someone cheering. You're like, okay, it worked, but like, why did it sound like that? There was no satisfying explosion visually or sound. So it kind of like it tipped its bit instantly.
Right. You knew that it just wasn't a big enough moment to be the true resolution. And say what you want about Randy Quaid's crazy ass, but like his character at least got to be the hero.
Yeah.
He sacrificed himself and it worked. Like sacrificing yourself in vain for this character is pretty dark when you think about it.
Is that in vain? I guess you could count it as that was
step one of the victory.
Yeah, that was the first round of the boss fight. You have to get her out of the ship. Round 2, you have to break her shield. And then round 3, you do the killing blow.
If you're this kind of person who cares about honoring the legacy of the original, which I don't really, even though I'm a big fan of it, I could see being very turned off by that moment.
Yeah.
For me, it just feels like a weird filmmaking device, though. Like it just feels very anticlimactic. And you're, like you said, you're tipping your hand. We know this isn't it because if it was, it would have been a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Also, you've told us about this queen so many times. Like we're not going to see her at all.
Right. That would have been anticlimactic if you wouldn't have seen her. But it steals the memory of Bill Pullman because you can't enjoy remembering him saying yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, because it was actually meaningless what he did. So it's not a nice memory.
And then it sets up, we get the speech from the alien, the Eva from WALL-E. That's how I refer to her. I don't remember if she had a name.
No, they didn't name this thing, the sphere, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they even gave her
They didn't give her
any
name.
kind of something.
Nope. So she's Eva, and
Okay.
she's like, I'll teach you how to defeat them, and we can go to their planet. And then Dr. Oaken turns to the camera and it's like, we're going to kick some serious alien ass. And then I threw a fucking hammer at my TV.
It's too bad because it was a nice TV that you had.
It is a really nice TV. I'm not going to throw a hammer at it because of this fucking movie, but it just, like, I've already said my piece about watching an entire movie just to be told the real movie's coming in 3 years or whatever. And of course, this movie fucking failed, so we're never going to get it. So what is this? It's a curious little footnote in history that, you know, a curious footnote that somebody spent $165 million making and then probably another $165 million advertising. But still, it's rare to get a movie that ends on a cliffhanger this explicit
Right.
and just never go anywhere with it. We didn't even get a fucking animated movie that's like the cop out. Like, we'll do a cartoon. We didn't even get that. Nobody involved just wanted to revisit this at all.
It's not that motivating. Like you said, it's hard to pay attention in the middle of this movie. It's hard to remember. We said that to each other before we started taping. Like, we watched this movie a couple days ago and it's like, what happened in it? What was it about? It doesn't really stick with you.
It doesn't stick with you at all. One of the least memorable movies I can think of covering for the podcast, even the movies I really hated that we covered, like R.I.P.D. and That's My Boy, they're bad in memorable ways. This movie just fucking bores you to death.
Yeah.
You want to hear a little bit about the people involved and where they've gone since then?
Yeah. Were they bored to death too, or are they still alive?
Well, so I can start with Roland Emmerich because he is the master of the disaster movie. Interestingly enough, he has not had a movie make money since 2012, which ironically came out in 2009.
That's confusing.
He's made Anonymous, White House Down, Stonewall, this movie, Midway, and Moonfall. They all flopped. So I don't think he has anything in the pipeline right now because he's probably persona non grata in Hollywood by this point. I think he's a very base level filmmaker and people kind of expect more.
It's weird. Has anyone taken his place? That would be the question that I would ask next. And not being a movie expert, I can't answer it for myself. But did we move away from big disaster movies and the public lost a taste for it? Or did someone start doing it better than him?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think disaster movies on the Roland Emmerich scale have by and large kind of gone away. What you're seeing now are more like smaller disaster movies. Don't get me wrong. There are still some very stupid big disaster movies coming. But Moonfall is probably the dumbest premise for a movie I've ever heard of. That's Roland Emmerich. But then Dean Devlin directed Geostorm, a disaster movie that's mind-bogglingly dumb.
Okay.
Dean Devlin, of course, Roland Emmerich's creative partner and the writer of this movie. So there's the Zoe Lister-Jones movie called How It Ends, which is more about her kind of grappling with the people in her life and how does she want to leave things with them. So it's filmed not from the point of view of people trying to stop the end of the world, but people trying to accept the end of the world.
Okay.
Which is a more interesting way to go with it. It'd be nice if you could marry those two and have a movie that had that kind of tone, but also the money to show some stuff.
Yeah.
And then there was a movie like an alien invasion comedy that came out during COVID called Save Yourselves about Brooklyn hipsters dealing with an alien invasion when they're staying at a friend's cabin. So like they're getting like more tongue in cheek, I think, as time goes on and a little sillier because they're inherently pretty silly movies.
That sounds like a real fuckaroo.
It is a real fuckaroo, Beeve. And then there's The Wave, which was a Norwegian disaster film I really liked, which is, you know, if you can imagine, it's about a tidal wave. And it's that one's played much more straight. But it's also a much better movie than anything Roland Emmerich ever made, and it's much smarter. And it's on a smaller scale. You know, there is some special effects in that movie, so they don't completely play it as if we have $0, but we got to show the end of the world somehow. They had like somewhere in between those other ones I just described in this one. There's like a middle ground to be found.
Yeah, it's interesting, but also maybe Marvel stole their thunder. Like
that's true, because the end of every Marvel movie is more or less a disaster movie. Right?
Yeah, they went to global levels of disaster. Like it's hard to top that. So maybe that satisfied the public's appetite.
That's a good point. I think you might have just nailed it because now we can watch this stuff. We can watch cities crumble, buildings burn, big tidal waves happen, whatever. And we can also watch it while our favorite actors play our favorite characters instead of just having John Cusack being some guy in the middle of it all.
Some wacky scientists going off the handle.
Yeah, that's actually a really good theory. I think you might have nailed it. Dean Devlin, who wrote a bunch of stuff with Emmerich, also wrote this. He would go on to direct Geostorm, like I mentioned, which is just a bananas movie. We're waiting for Nate to be ready to come on the podcast to talk about that one. We're saving that for our buddy Soul Nate.
Looking forward to that.
Another screenwriter on this movie was James Vanderbilt, who we dove into on the Rundown pod because he was one of the writers of that movie. So he also wrote Zodiac.
Yeah,
and this movie. You fucking believe it.
That's hard to square.
Some of his other credits, he wrote White House Down, so he'd worked with Emmerich and Devlin in the past. And he wrote the Scream that just came out, which I think people ended up liking. So it seems like he's not a totally hapless screenwriter. He obviously wrote one of my top 5 movies of all time. In The Rundown, of course. No, I mean Zodiac. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, was there a Justified crossover with this movie? You bet your fucking ass there was. There was 2.
Justified crossover of the week.
Hell yeah.
We had Ron Yoon as a weapons engineer in this movie, and he was Simon Lee in season 5 of Justified. And Robert Neary was Crosley in Justified and Captain McQuaid in this movie. Was Captain McQuaid one of the guys on the boat? Did they actually get a name?
Your guess is as good as mine.
I could not tell you who the fuck Captain McQuaid was. Liam Hemsworth said production had to be shut down for 4 days because they ran out of money, which is hilarious on a $165 million movie.
Why is he the one leaking the production gossip?
Because he probably doesn't give a shit. Like, he probably hates this movie and is just, well, I can speak my truth now.
You're right. That fits with my theory that he was fucking with us the whole time by drinking in every scene.
And I wanted to mention that because I was like, I should watch another Liam Hemsworth movie before talking about this one, because I don't know if he's just a bad actor. So I checked out a little movie. This is a bonus show and tell for you guys, called Arkansas, directed by Clark Duke. And the little guy from The Office and Hot Tub Time Machine. Also starring Vivica A. Fox. So I was like, well, that's fun because they reunited. They didn't really get any screen time together in this movie, but they get some in that one. Vince Vaughn plays the bad guy. John Malkovich has a role in it. It's a very star-studded cast for this little dirtbag crime thriller that Clark Duke made.
Yeah.
And Hemsworth is pretty good in it. So I think he is capable of being good. He just could not be bothered. As far as what else he's done, he's not quite as Big Brother Chris, but he's also not quite as Big Brother Luke. He's in the middle. He's staying busy. He was in a Rebel Wilson romantic comedy parody called Isn't It Romantic in 2019. He was on a TV show called The Most Dangerous Game that I've never heard about. Sounds made up.
Yep.
He's got a movie in post-production called Poker Face. He's filming a movie called Lonely Planet and a movie in pre-production called Land of Bad. So he's been busy.
Yeah, a lot to look forward to.
Maika Monroe, she's been working too. She was in Watcher, a movie that just came out that I think got pretty good reviews. She's got Significant Other and God is a Bullet both in post-production. Those titles tell me nothing about those movies.
She's the star of It Follows, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where did that come out? Because I watch everything out of order.
2014. That was before. Yeah, she had that. And she had, what else did she have in 2014? She had The Guest in 2014, which is another movie I like. Yeah, so she's been in some good stuff. She's working. She's staying busy. Again, we both really liked her in It Follows. So she probably was not bringing her A game to Independence Day Resurgence. And who can really blame her?
No, she was cashing in.
Another actor who didn't bring his A game was Jesse T. Usher, which we mentioned. He's obviously known for being A-Train on The Boys. But he's also going to be one of the stars of an upcoming Walking Dead spinoff called Tales of the Walking Dead.
Okay, that sounds ill-advised. Hasn't everyone already decided that they've spun off enough Walking Dead stuff and it's an undead horse?
Oh, man. You don't even know the number of stuff we're getting. We're getting 2 Rick movies.
Oh, shit.
Multiple spinoffs coming. I think Fear the Walking Dead is still going. They got to let that thing die.
That seems like way too slow. I'm not exactly hip.
Yeah, they waited way too late to cash in.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Good luck to them.
Even the people I know that still watch it do so begrudgingly.
Yeah.
I've invested this much time. I can't quit now.
Yeah. I only sampled the show at the beginning of its run, and you told me how weary you were.
I don't need to tell anyone what Jeff Goldblum's been up to. He's obviously been very busy.
Yeah. You told us at the top of the show. He does not hesitate to show up when anyone calls him for a sequel.
And I respect that because he just plays himself now. He's entered the Christopher Walken, Dennis Hopper territory where they're just like, let me just be a weirdo in a movie.
Or let me sell apartments. I don't care. I don't give a shit.
Bill Pullman was in The Sinner from 2017 to 2021. I watched the first season of that. It wasn't bad.
I watched the pilot. That has a gruesome stabbing on the beach, right?
It sure does, yeah.
Really good pilot. And then I don't think I went more than a couple episodes deep in that one.
I think from what my understanding, every season deals with a different case and he's the thread that kind of ties them together.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Because the first one was with Jessica Biel, but I think she's just a 1 season and done character on that show.
It's a good model for the show, and nice for Bill Pullman to get to be the heart of that.
Yeah. It was kind of like the Mr. Mercedes show with Brendan Gleeson. Had a similar conceit that I really liked. He's been in Dark Waters, The Equalizer 2. Did you know they made a sequel to The Equalizer? I didn't. And The Coldest Game. So he's busy, but he's maybe not getting the level of credit that he would probably like. He's a working actor. He's not like a top line star, which, there are worse things to be.
Yeah.
Talking about working actors, Vivica A. Fox, she has such a small role in this movie, I wasn't even going to give her own little blurb until I saw the amount of credits she has. She has starred in 72 things since this movie came out, and she's got another 12 in some stage of production.
Let's clarify, that's not since the original, that's since the 2016 sequel.
Since 2016, she has 72 credits and another 12 in production.
Holy shit.
That is bananas. Good for her, though.
Man, she's racking it up.
Oof. And then, so we talked a little bit about the box office. I guess we don't need to belabor the box office with this movie. It didn't do great opening week and nobody liked it, so it did even worse every week after that. The Chinese box office almost saved it, but couldn't do quite enough. But I was struck actually looking at how little competition it really had when it came out. You know, it had Finding Dory in its second week, which there's not going to be a lot of audience overlap. And then the next week, The Legend of Tarzan, The Purge, Election Year, and the BFG all beat it out. I guess maybe there was some competition with the BFG, but that was a flop in its own. I don't know. And then the next week, The Secret Life of Pets and Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates came out. So there's no overlap there. Week 4 was their first big competition, and it was Ghostbusters that we've already covered.
Yeah.
So it really did have a decent runway to rack up some money at the box office domestically, and it just didn't take advantage of it because word of mouth was horrible, the reviews were terrible, and the trailer's bad. I watched the trailer to make sure I wasn't like, nope, trailer sucks. This is just a movie that was undone by being bad because nostalgia. No one's ever gone broke, you know, like preying on Americans' nostalgia.
Yeah, that's the thing is 20-year nostalgia is really hard to do. That's why it's so remarkable that Top Gun pulled off what they did, because it's like, as in this movie, theoretically, the people who enjoyed this first movie needed to have kids, raise those kids, teach them to love the original, and then send them out to the theaters.
Yeah, you need the generational overlap, and Top Gun did it. Top Gun's the only movie that figured out how to get people over the age of 50 back in the movie theater post-COVID, which is a huge part of its success. But this one, it's just bad, you know? Like, maybe you could have done it, but it's bad. And I could also see the first one maybe not resonating with young audiences as much. Will Smith's his star's fallen a little bit even before the events of the Oscars. He was really hunting for the Oscar and he got it, but his box office draw ability had diminished greatly.
Yeah, it's not what it was in its prime.
Yeah, I don't know how young audiences view the original Independence Day. I also don't know how they view the original Top Gun, but it didn't seem to matter.
No, that's weird. Top Gun, we need a Patreon where we do the shoulda bombed movies because we would have put that in that category. Like, it's going to totally fall on its face.
Yeah. Should have been bombed.
Thank you.
That was my Steve Perry impression. Well, you're in luck because that is the idea we have for our Patreon, Ian.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure you know that because we've discussed it.
Now our fans know that. Should I ask this question publicly? We can cut it out.
Oh, God. I'm scared, but ask it.
Would you support us if we started a Patreon? Would you love to hear Jon sing in the style of Steve Perry once a month and do an interesting film that we thought should have bombed but did not and try to figure out why that happened?
Well, it's not that we thought should have bombed. It just had the makings of a bomb for whatever reason. Bad buzz, production problems, directors getting fired in the middle of it, stars bad-mouthing it before the movie came out, but somehow they still managed to come out the other side. And you might be shocked to hear about like some of the most troubled productions in Hollywood that ended up being like Titanic is a absolutely perfect example because we told you they rushed the release of Event Horizon thinking, well, at least we can make some money on this movie when Titanic bankrupts us later.
That's a great part of that story. So yeah, this would not be about our personal grudges about movies that we wish would have bombed. Crazy things happen in Hollywood, and sometimes movies that look like they're going to sink take off.
Speaking of movies that look like they're going to sink but take off, should we tell them what we're doing next week?
Oh, yeah.
Because it took off, but maybe not in the way the studio wanted.
What time is it, baby?
It's Morbin time.
Yeah.
We're finally doing it. I say finally. The movie came out like 4 months ago. But we're going to fucking do Morbius. For you maniacs.
I'm curious to hear what happens when you go into the world of Morbius, because I've been in there. I've lived through it.
Scary.
It's scary going in, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. And so I'm really curious to see what happens when you go into the cave.
This will be by far the most recent we've covered a movie. This one just came out.
Yeah.
And, we've done bonus episodes on movies the week they came out, but this is the first true Blast Zone episode we'll be doing on a movie this week.
And it instantly flopped on a historic level.
Well, not even financially. Like, the movie didn't do that bad financially. It lost money, but it deserves an episode simply for them being bullied into putting it back in theaters by internet memes and then having nobody go see it second time around.
Yeah.
Is just such a hilarious chain of events that it needs to be explored more.
Yeah, the cultural side of it is Ishtar level in terms of what this movie now means flop.
I think it's a great way to examine the convergence of corporations and the internet that they don't truly understand.
I'm not even sure I believe that narrative. I think we'll have to try to dive deeper into that because it's very easy to say the dumb old studio execs were fooled by the young memester trolls. But did that really happen?
It's a little trickier because it's newer. There's not all the, there hasn't been an oral history of Morbius published in Entertainment Weekly yet because the movie just came out. So there's a little less behind the scenes information available for it, but we'll do whatever digging we can and try to get you some answers. But once again, thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod if you're enjoying it. We appreciate you.
We do.
You can shoot us an email, blastzonepod@gmail.com. Check us out on Twitter @blastzonepod. And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.